Now you're going to hear people say that a treaty, he said there is no Treaty of Niagara because there's no document. There's no document with signed signatures, and nobody signed with their DODEM or anything else like that. But before we used paper, this was our treaty. And getting together, visiting each other, feeding each other, feasting with one another, this was the treaty. And every year, 1764 to 1854, the British came to deliver presents at Michilimackinac, and then after the American Revolution, they delivered the presents to St. Joseph's Island. Then after the War of 1812, they delivered the presents to Drummond Island. And then after 1836, they delivered the presents at Manitoulin Island. And each time they moved where the place of delivering the presents, they said, you moved your council fire. You moved your council fire. The king established a council fire. And then likewise at Detroit, and then after Detroit became American territory, they moved their council fire to Amherstburg, which is just south of Detroit. Likewise here, on the eastern side, they had a council fire at Niagara, and that's Fort Niagara. And then it was on what it was now called the American side. Then they moved that to the Canadian side, to Fort Mississauga, and that's where they delivered these presents. And the same thing over at Montreal and Fort Pitt. So that's what these council fires also represent. And then what they had said at that time, Sir William Johnson had also said, instead of just, you'll see this belt on the internet, and you'll see that some people now, when they made this belt, they don't have this center part, and that it looks like chain links. But why that's in there, Sir William Johnson said, I now take the dish, meaning the dish with one spoon, and I place it at the council fire at Niagara, at Detroit, at Michilimackinac, so that you won't have to feed yourselves there. And they always would give us provisions at that time. When they came up to Manitoulin and they said in 1852, we're going to stop giving you presents. They had cutbacks back then. They were saying it costs, all through this time they kept saying the Indian presents cost too much, get rid of them. And so what they ended up doing is the British ended up saying, you're an American Indian, you live on the state side, you don't get any presents. And then the chief said, no, you were the one who asked me to fight alongside you against the Chimokmanen, against the Americans. That's what they told him. He says, you're the one who did, now you're supposed to pay me for that. So they tried to cut the American Anishinaabe that came across to Drummond Island to get their presents, even though they fought with them during the War of 1812. And then after that, anybody who wasn't married to an Anishinaabe who was married to a Jaganash or a Wentagosh, a British or a Frenchman, they said, you don't get presents either. So that's when they started cutting these presents. And then in 1852, they announced at Manitowaning that they're going to stop giving these presents. And this is Chief Shingwa Kons of Garden River, who had said this in August of 1852 at Manitowaning. Says, we beg of you to believe what we say, for though we cannot put down our thoughts on paper as you, our wampum and the records of our old men are as undying as your writings, and they do not deceive.